Maria Santos had worked for the wealthy Harrison family for 12 years. Every morning at 6 sharp, she unlocked the massive front door of their Beverly Hills mansion and began her daily routine. Polish the marble floors, dust the expensive artwork, prepare breakfast for Mr. Harrison and his teenage son David. The same schedule, day after day. But today felt different. Maria noticed at the moment she stepped into the kitchen. David sat hunched over his phone at the breakfast table, his shoulders shaking. The 17-year-old boy who usually greeted her with a cheerful smile looked broken. "Good morning, David," Maria said softly, setting down her cleaning supplies. "You were awake early today." David looked up with red, swollen eyes. "She's gone, Maria. The police said she's dead. They found her car by the river, but no body. Dad says I need to accept it and move on." Maria's heart clenched. David's mother, Mrs. Catherine Harrison, had disappeared 3 months ago. The police investigation had stalled. Mr. Harrison seemed eager to declare his wife dead and collect the insurance money. But something about the whole situation never sat right with Maria. "Your mama was a strong woman," Maria said, placing a gentle hand on David's shoulder. "She taught you to never give up, yes? But everyone says she's gone. Dad's already talking about selling the house and moving to New York for his business. He says there's nothing left for us here." David's voice cracked. Maria had watched Catherine Harrison raise this boy with love and patience. She remembered how Mrs. Harrison would sneak extra cookies into David's lunchbox, how she would stay up all night when he had fever, how she fought with Mr. Harrison about sending David to boarding school because she wanted him close. "David, listen to me," Maria said, sitting down beside him. "Your mama loved you more than anything in this world. If she could come home to you, she would. But sometimes when people are in trouble, they cannot find their way back alone." "What do you mean?" Maria chose her words carefully. She had suspicions about Mr. Harrison, but she could not voice them to his son. "Sometimes we must look for the people we love, even when others tell us to stop looking." David wiped his eyes. "You really think she might still be alive? I think a mother's love is the strongest force on earth. And I think you know your mama better than anyone else. What does your heart tell you?" David sat quietly for several minutes. Outside, the morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. Finally, he spoke. "She wouldn't just leave me. Even if she was scared or hurt, she wouldn't abandon me. Dad keeps saying she was unstable, that she might have hurt herself, but that's not who she was." Maria nodded. She had seen the bruises Mrs. Harrison try to hide with makeup. She had heard the late-night arguments through the walls. She had watched Mrs. Harrison become increasingly frightened in the weeks before she disappeared. "Your papa, he is grieving in his own way," Maria said diplomatically. "But grief makes people do different things. Some people give up. Some people keep fighting. I want to keep fighting, but I don't know how. I'm just a kid." "You are not just anything, David. You are Catherine Harrison's son. You have her strength, her intelligence, her heart. And you are not alone." Maria made a decision that would change everything. She had been born in El Salvador during the Civil War. Her own mother had disappeared when Maria was 15, taken by soldiers in the middle of the night. Maria had spent 2 years searching, asking questions, following every lead until she found her mother in a refugee camp 50 miles away. "If you want to look for your mama, I will help you," Maria said. "Really? But what if Dad finds out? Your papa hired me to take care of this family. Taking care of you means helping you do what is right. And finding your mama is what is right." Over the next hour, Maria and David developed a plan. David would attend school as normal to avoid suspicion. Maria would use her network of domestic workers throughout the city to gather information. Maids, gardeners, and drivers saw everything in wealthy neighborhoods. They knew which families had problems, which spouses were unfaithful, which marriages were falling apart. "We start with your mama's friends," Maria explained. "Then we talk to people who work in their houses. Rich people forget that their help has eyes and ears." David pulled out his phone and showed Maria his mother's contact list. She was closest to Mrs. Peterson, Mrs. Chun, and Mrs. Rodriguez. But Dad said he already talked to all of them. Your papa asks different questions than we will ask. Men and women hear different things. And rich men definitely do not hear the same things that working women hear. That afternoon, while David was at school, Maria visited Elena Rodriguez, who worked for the Peterson family. They met at a small coffee shop in East Los Angeles, far from the wealthy neighborhoods where they both worked. "Maria, it is good to see you," Elena said, embracing her friend. "How are you holding up? I heard about Mrs. Harrison. That is why I need to talk to you, Elena. Something is not right about this whole thing." Elena's expression grew serious. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Harrison was scared before she disappeared. She was making plans to leave, but not permanently. She was planning to take David somewhere safe. Safe from what? Maria lowered her voice. From her husband. I think he was hurting her. Elena nodded slowly. Mrs. Peterson mentioned something strange. A few weeks before Mrs. Harrison disappeared, she came to the house very upset. She wanted to borrow money. A lot of money. Mrs. Peterson was confused because the Harrisons are rich. How much money? $50,000. In cash. Mrs. Peterson said Mrs. Harrison was shaking when she asked. She said she needed it for something urgent, but could not explain what. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. Did Mrs. Peterson give her the money? No. She offered to write a check, but Mrs. Harrison said it had to be cash and it had to be secret. Mrs. Peterson got scared and said no. Who else might she have asked? I do not know, but Mrs. Peterson said Mrs. Harrison left a manila envelope at their house. She said if anything happened to her, Mrs. Peterson should give the envelope to David. Maria's pulse quickened. Where is this envelope? Mrs. Peterson still has it. She was afraid to give it to Mr. Harrison because Mrs. Harrison specifically said it was for David only. Can you get it? Elena hesitated. It might cost me my job. Elena, what if it was your daughter who was missing? What if there was a chance she was still alive? Elena stared into her coffee cup for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. I will get the envelope tonight. Meet me here tomorrow at the same time. When David returned from school that day, Maria could see hope in his eyes for the first time in months. Did you find anything? He asked eagerly. Maybe. Your mama was planning something before she disappeared. She was trying to get money to go somewhere safe. Safe from what? Maria struggled with how much to tell him. David, I think your mama was in some kind of danger. I think she was trying to protect herself and you. David's face darkened. From Dad, I do not know for sure, but tomorrow I might have more answers. There is something your mama left for you. That night, David could barely sleep. He lay in his bed thinking about his mother, about all the times she had seemed scared or sad in the months before she disappeared. He thought about the arguments he had heard through the walls, about how his father had become increasingly controlling and angry. Meanwhile, 3 miles away, Elena Rodriguez crept through the Peterson mansion in the dark. She knew the family was at their vacation home in Aspen. She knew the alarm code because Mrs. Peterson trusted her completely. She found the manila envelope exactly where Mrs. Peterson had described, hidden in the back of a bedroom closet behind winter coats. The envelope was thick and heavy. Elena could feel documents and what might be photographs inside. Her hands trembling, she slipped it into her purse and reset the alarm. As she drove home through the empty streets of Los Angeles, Elena prayed she was doing the right thing. She thought about her own children, about how she would want someone to help them if they were in danger. The next morning, Maria arrived at the Harrison house with a sense of purpose she had not felt in months. David was waiting for her in the kitchen, already dressed for school, but clearly too anxious to eat. You could not sleep either? Maria asked. I kept thinking about Mom, about all the signs I missed. I should have known something was wrong. You were a child trying to survive in a difficult house. That is not your fault. Maria made David eat some toast and drink orange juice before school. She needed him to appear normal, to not arouse his father's suspicions. Mr. Harrison had been asking more questions lately about David's activities and mood. Remember, act like any other day, Maria instructed. Do not let your papa see that we are investigating. After David left for school, Maria spent the morning doing her normal housework and waiting for the afternoon meeting. She cleaned every room thoroughly, paying special attention to Mr. Harrison's office. She had learned over the years that rich people often left important papers lying around because they forgot their help could read. Today, she noticed something new on Mr. Harrison's desk. Plane tickets to Switzerland. 2 tickets, both for the following week. Both in Mr. Harrison's name. No ticket for David. Maria felt sick to her stomach. Mr. Harrison was planning to leave the country without his son. Either he knew his wife was alive and was running away, or had killed her and was escaping before anyone discovered the truth. At 3:30, Maria met Elena at the coffee shop. Her friend looked nervous but determined. "I have it," Elena said, sliding the manila envelope across the table. "Mrs. Peterson called this morning. She is flying home early from Aspen. She wants to give this to David herself, but she is scared of Mr. Harrison." Maria opened the envelope carefully. Inside were photographs, documents, and a letter in Mrs. Harrison's handwriting. The photographs showed bruises on Mrs. Harrison's arms and back. The documents were bank statements showing large cash withdrawals. The letter was dated 2 days before Mrs. Harrison's disappearance. Maria read the letter silently, her eyes growing wide. "My dearest David, if you are reading this, then something has happened to me. I have been planning to take you somewhere safe, away from your father. He has been threatening to hurt us both if I try to leave him or take you away. I have been saving money and making arrangements, but I am afraid he suspects something. I have found a place where we can hide until I can get legal help to protect us. But if something happens to me before I can take you there, you must be brave and smart. Trust Maria Santos. She is the only person in our house who truly cares about our family. I have left more information in a place only you would think to look. Remember the story I used to tell you about the brave princess who hid her treasure where only true love could find it. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Be strong, my beautiful boy." Mama Maria's hands shook as she finished reading. Mrs. Harrison had been planning to escape with David. She had been saving money and making arrangements, and she had hidden something important somewhere only David would think to look. "What does it say?" Elena asked. "It says Catherine Harrison was trying to save her son's life," Maria whispered, "and it says she might still be alive." When David came home from school, Maria was waiting for him with the envelope. She watched as he read his mother's letter, saw the pain and hope and determination cross his face in waves. "She was trying to protect me," David said finally. "Yes, and she still might be trying to protect you. What does she mean about the brave princess story? You tell me. It was your story between you and your mama." David thought hard. "She used to tell me a story about a princess who hid her most precious treasure in the place she felt safest. The treasure was hidden where only someone who truly loved her could find it. Where did your mama feel safest?" David's eyes lit up. "Her garden. She spent hours in her rose garden every day. She said it was the only place in the house that felt like home. Then, that is where we look." But as they made plans to search the garden, neither Maria nor David noticed the black sedan that had been parked across the street for the past hour. Neither of them saw the man with the telephoto lens camera who had been documenting their every move. Mr. Harrison was having his wife's maid and son watched, and soon he would have to decide what to do about their investigation into his wife's disappearance. Because Richard Harrison knew exactly where his wife was. He had put her there himself. That evening, after Mr. Harrison left for what he claimed was a business dinner, Maria and David crept into the moonlit garden behind the mansion. The rose garden had been Catherine Harrison's pride and joy. She had planted every bush herself, carefully arranging them in patterns that created a natural maze of beauty and fragrance. Where would she hide something? Maria whispered, carrying a small flashlight. David walked slowly through the paths between the roses, remembering all the afternoons he had spent here with his mother. She always said the white roses were special because they reminded her of hope. And there's one bush that's different from all the others. He led Maria to the center of the garden, where a single white rose bush grew larger and fuller than all the rest. At its base was a small stone angel statue, weathered by years of rain and sun. Mom said this angel was watching over our family, David said, kneeling down beside it. Maria helped him search around the statue. Behind it, hidden beneath a loose stone, they found a small waterproof container. Inside was a key and another note in Catherine's handwriting. Safety Deposit Box 247, First National Bank, Downtown Branch. The manager's name is Janet Wong. She knows about our situation. Tell her the password is White Roses and she will help you. I have documented everything your father has done to us. If something happens to me, this evidence will protect you. But, David, if you are reading this, you must be very careful. Your father is dangerous when cornered. Trust only Maria and Janet Wong. I love you. Mom. David clutched the key to his chest. She really was trying to save us. And she still might need us to save her, Maria said. But first we need to see what is in that safety deposit box. As they walked back toward the house, neither of them noticed the infrared camera hidden in the oak tree 30 feet away. Richard Harrison had invested in sophisticated surveillance equipment months ago when he first suspected his wife was planning to leave him. From his car parked 2 blocks away, Harrison watched the feed on his tablet. He saw his son and the maid find the hidden container. He saw them examine the key and note, and he realized his carefully constructed plan was falling apart. Harrison had spent months preparing for this moment. He had moved money to offshore accounts. He had created a new identity. He had arranged for his wife's accident to look like suicide or accidental drowning. But he had underestimated the determination of a teenage boy and an immigrant woman who genuinely cared about his family. He made a phone call to a number he had hoped never to use. "It's me," he said when someone answered. "I need the cleanup service. Tonight." The next morning, Maria arrived at work to find the house unusually quiet. Mr. Harrison's car was gone, but that was normal. David should have been getting ready for school, but his room was empty. Maria felt a cold dread in her stomach. She searched the entire house, calling David's name. Finally, she found a note on the kitchen counter in handwriting she did not recognize. "The boy is safe for now. Stop looking for what should stay lost, or he will join his mother permanently. You have 24 hours to forget everything you think you know." Maria's hands shook as she read the note again. David had been taken. Whoever had taken him knew about their investigation into Catherine's disappearance, and they were threatening to kill both David and his mother if Maria did not stop looking. But Maria Santos had not survived a civil war, escaped poverty, and built a life in a foreign country by giving up when things got dangerous. She had promised David she would help him find his mother. She had promised Catherine, in her heart, that she would protect her son. Maria called the one person she trusted completely. Her sister Rosa worked as a nurse at County General Hospital and had connections throughout the immigrant community in Los Angeles. "Rosa, I need help," Maria said when her sister answered the phone. "A boy is in danger. His mother is missing, and I think someone's going to try to hurt me for looking into it. Come to the hospital now," Rosa said immediately. "We will figure this out together." But as Maria prepared to leave the Harrison house, she realized she could not abandon her investigation. If she stopped now, David and Catherine would both die. Her only chance was to find Catherine quickly and use whatever evidence she had hidden to save her son. Maria made a decision that terrified her. She would go to the bank alone, get the evidence from the safety deposit box, and then figure out how to save David. It was dangerous and probably stupid, but it was the only plan she had. She drove to downtown Los Angeles, constantly checking her mirrors to see if she was being followed. The First National Bank was an imposing glass building in the financial district. Maria had never been inside such a place, and she felt intimidated by the marble floors and well-dressed employees. "I need to speak with Janet Wong," Maria told the receptionist. "Do you have an appointment?" "Tell her it is about Catherine Harrison and White Roses." The receptionist made a phone call, spoke quietly for a moment, then gestured toward the elevator. Ms. Wong will see you immediately. 23rd floor. Janet Wong turned out to be a small, serious woman in her 40s. Her office was filled with law books and family photographs. She looked at Maria with worried eyes. Mrs. Harrison said someone might come asking about her safety deposit box, Janet said. She made me promise to help, no matter what happened to her. Do you have the key? Maria showed her the key David had found in the garden. Janet nodded and led her to the elevator. Mrs. Harrison was terrified when she came here 3 months ago, Janet explained as they rode down to the vault level. She said her husband was planning to hurt her and her son. She wanted to make sure there was evidence in case something happened. The safety deposit box was larger than Maria had expected. Inside were dozens of documents, photographs, audio recordings, and a thick legal folder. She documented everything, Janet said, helping Maria examine the contents. Bank records showing her husband stealing money from her trust fund. Medical records of her injuries. Photographs of bruises and cuts. Audio recordings of him threatening to kill her if she tried to leave. Maria felt sick looking at the evidence of Catherine's suffering. But there was something else in the box that made her heart race with hope. A receipt from a private medical facility called Haven Hills Recovery Center, dated 1 week after Catherine's supposed death. The receipt was for ongoing care for a patient listed as Jane Doe, severe head trauma, partial amnesia. Janet, Maria said, her voice shaking. What if Catherine is not dead? What if she is alive, but injured and cannot remember who she is? Janet examined the receipt carefully. Haven Hills is a private facility that treats patients who need to hide their identities. Witness protection, abuse victims, people who need to disappear for their own safety. Could her husband have put her there? No, but she could have put herself there. If she was planning to fake her death to escape him, she might have arranged for emergency medical care under a false name. Maria felt a surge of hope and terror. Catherine might be alive, but David was still missing and in danger. She needed to find them both, and she was running out of time. I need to get to Haven Hills, Maria said. But first I need to copy all of this evidence. Janet helped her photocopy every document and burn the audio recordings to a CD. Then she gave Maria something unexpected, a business card for a lawyer named Sarah Chun. Mrs. Harrison hired Sarah to help her if anything went wrong, Janet explained. Sarah specializes in domestic violence cases and witness protection. She knows about the situation. Maria left the bank with copies of all the evidence and a desperate plan forming in her mind. She would call Sarah Chun, go to Haven Hills to look for Catherine, and somehow find a way to save David before the 24-hour deadline expired. But as she walked to her car, Maria noticed something that made her blood run cold. The same black sedan that had been parked near the Harrison house was now parked across from the bank. Someone had been following her all day. Maria pretended not to notice the surveillance and drove normally to a busy shopping mall. She parked near the main entrance, went inside, and immediately called her sister Rosa. Rosa, I need you to pick me up at the Westfield Mall food court in 20 minutes. Do not bring your car. Take the bus or call a taxi. I think someone is following me. Maria, what is going on? I will explain later. Just please help me. Maria spent 15 minutes moving through the mall, using every trick she had learned growing up in a war zone to lose potential followers. She changed clothes in a department store bathroom, bought a baseball cap to hide her hair, and exited through a service entrance near the loading dock. Rosa arrived in a taxi just as Maria emerged from behind the mall. They embraced quickly before getting into the cab. Driver, take us to County General Hospital, Rosa said. Then she turned to her sister. Now tell me what is happening. As the taxi wound through Los Angeles traffic, Maria explained everything. The investigation, the evidence, David's disappearance, and her theory that Catherine was alive but injured and hiding in a medical facility. This is very dangerous, Maria, Rosa said when she finished. These people have already kidnapped a child. They will hurt you too if they catch you. Then, I cannot let them catch me. But I also cannot abandon David and Catherine. They're my family, too. Rosa was quiet for several minutes, thinking. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but we do this smart, not brave. First, we call this lawyer Sarah-chan and tell her everything. Then, we call the police and report David as kidnapped. Then, if you still want to look for Catherine, we do it together. Maria felt a wave of relief. She was not alone in this fight anymore. They spent the next hour at the hospital, using Rosa's office to make phone calls and plan their next moves. Sarah-chan agreed to meet them immediately and bring a private investigator who specialized in missing persons cases. But time was running out. The 24-hour deadline was approaching, and Maria still had no idea where David was being held or how to contact his kidnappers. As sunset painted the sky orange over Los Angeles, Maria made a decision that would either save 2 lives or end her own. She was going to Haven Hills Recovery Center to look for Catherine Harrison. And she was going alone because she could not risk putting her sister in more danger. What Maria did not know was that Richard Harrison was also making plans for the evening. He had decided to eliminate all the loose ends that threatened his carefully constructed new life. Haven Hills Recovery Center sat nestled in the mountains 30 miles northeast of Los Angeles. The facility looked more like a luxury resort than a medical center, with Spanish-style buildings surrounded by gardens and walking paths. Maria arrived just as visiting hours were ending, her heart pounding with nervousness and hope. At the front desk, a kind-looking woman in her 50s greeted Maria with a professional smile. "Good evening. How can I help you?" "I'm looking for someone who might be a patient here," Maria said carefully. A woman who would have been admitted about 3 months ago with head injuries and memory problems. The receptionist's expression grew cautious. "I'm sorry, but we cannot discuss our patients without proper authorization. Are you a family member?" Maria had prepared for this question. "I am her son's guardian. Her husband is abusive, and we believe he tried to hurt her. We just need to know if she is safe. I understand your concern, but our patient privacy policies are very strict. However, if you believe someone is in danger from domestic violence, I can have you speak with our social worker." 10 minutes later, Maria sat across from Linda Martinez, a bilingual social worker who specialized in helping abuse victims. Maria explained the entire situation, Catherine's disappearance, the evidence of abuse, David's kidnapping, and her theory that Catherine might be at Haven Hills under a false name. Linda listened intently, taking notes. When Maria finished, Linda was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Santos, what you're describing sounds very similar to a case we've been handling," Linda said finally. "We do have a patient who was admitted 3 months ago with severe head trauma and amnesia. She was brought in by paramedics who found her unconscious behind a restaurant in downtown Los Angeles." Maria's pulse quickened. "Can you tell me anything else about her?" "She's in her early 40s, blonde hair, about 5'6". When she was admitted, she had no identification and couldn't remember her name or how she was injured. She's been calling herself Jane. That could be Catherine Harrison. May I see her?" Linda hesitated. "Our patient has been making remarkable progress recently. Her memory is starting to return in fragments. But she's also been having terrible nightmares about a man trying to hurt her, and about a teenage boy she believes is her son. David," Maria whispered. "That is Catherine. If this woman is indeed Mrs. Harrison, then we need to be very careful. Her memories are fragile, and shock could set back her recovery significantly. But if her son is truly in danger," Linda made a decision that would change everything. "Come with me," she said, standing up. "But let me prepare her first. If this is your Mrs. Harrison, the reunion needs to be gentle." They walked through quiet hallways decorated with soothing artwork. Linda explained that Haven Hills specialized in treating patients who needed to recover in complete privacy, often people fleeing dangerous situations or recovering from trauma that made them targets. "Jane has been one of our most puzzling cases," Linda continued. "Her injuries were consistent with being struck by a car, but there were also signs of prior abuse. Healed fractures, old scars. We suspected she was running from someone when she was hurt. They stopped outside a room with a small window in the door. Through the glass, Maria could see a woman sitting in a chair by the window, looking out at the garden. She was thinner than Maria remembered, and her hair was shorter, but even from behind, Maria knew immediately who it was. "Catherine," Maria breathed. Linda knocked gently and entered the room. "Jane, I have someone here who might be able to help you remember some things. But I want you to stay calm and let the memories come naturally." The woman turned around, and Maria gasped. Despite the weight loss and the confusion in her eyes, it was definitely Catherine Harrison. Catherine looked at Maria with a puzzled expression, as if she almost recognized her, but could not quite place her. "Do I know you?" Catherine asked softly. Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, Mrs. Catherine. My name is Maria Santos. I work in your house. I take care of you and David." At the mention of David's name, Catherine's face changed. Her eyes grew wide and desperate. "David," she said urgently. "I keep having dreams about a boy named David. Is he real? Is he my son?" "Yes," Maria said, sitting down beside her. "David is your son. He is 17 years old, and he has been looking for you every day since you disappeared. He never stopped believing you were alive." Catherine began to cry, and the tears seemed to unlock something in her mind. "I remember him. Tall, brown hair, kind eyes like his mother's. But there was danger. Someone wanted to hurt us. Your husband," Maria said gently. "Richard Harrison. He was abusing you, and you were planning to take David somewhere safe." The memories crashed over Catherine like a wave. She remembered the months of fear, the escalating violence, the desperate plan to escape with David. She remembered withdrawing money, making arrangements, preparing to run. "I remember getting the money from different banks," Catherine said, her voice growing stronger. "I was going to pick up David from school and drive to a safe house in Oregon. But Richard found out. He followed me." "What happened that night?" Linda asked. "I was meeting someone downtown who was supposed to help us disappear. But when I got there, Richard was waiting. He had a gun. We fought in the alley behind the restaurant. I tried to run, but he hit me with his car." Maria felt sick. "He left you for dead. I think he believed I was dead. I remember lying on the ground, unable to move, hearing him make a phone call about cleaning up a mess. Then I must have lost consciousness. The next thing I remember is waking up here." "Mrs. Catherine," Maria said urgently, "David is in terrible danger. Richard has kidnapped him. He is threatening to kill David if I do not stop looking for you." The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. All the confusion and fog in her mind cleared instantly, replaced by the fierce protective instincts of a mother whose child was threatened. "Where is David now?" Catherine demanded. "I do not know. Richard's men took him yesterday. They said I have 24 hours to forget everything I learned, or they will kill both of you." Catherine stood up, suddenly, looking more like the strong woman Maria remembered. "How long until the deadline?" Maria checked her phone. 6 hours. "Then we need to move fast. Linda, I need to check out of this facility immediately. Maria, tell me everything that has happened since I disappeared." Over the next 30 minutes, Maria filled Catherine in on the investigation, the evidence they had found, and David's kidnapping. Catherine listened with growing anger and determination. "Richard always underestimated people he considered beneath him," Catherine said. "He probably thinks a maid and a confused woman are not threats to his plans. He's about to learn how wrong he is." Linda helped Catherine complete her discharge paperwork while Maria called Sarah Chun, the lawyer. Sarah agreed to meet them at her office with a private investigator and the police contacts she had cultivated over years of domestic violence cases. But as they prepared to leave Haven Hills, Maria received a phone call that made her blood run cold. "Miss Santos." The voice was electronically disguised. "I believe you have found something that does not belong to you. Where is David?" Maria demanded. "The boy is alive for now, but his survival depends on your choices in the next few hours. You will drive to the Harbor Freeway overpass at Slauson Avenue. Come alone. Bring no phones, no weapons, no recording devices. If we see anyone else, the boy dies immediately. I want proof that David is alive." There was a moment of silence. Then, David's voice came on the line. "Maria, don't come. It's a trap. They're going to kill us both anyway. Find my mom and get the police." The line went dead. Catherine had heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. "They're using David to draw you into a trap. I know, but I cannot let them hurt him." "You won't be going alone," Catherine said firmly. "David is my son. This is my fight." Linda looked worried. "Mrs. Harrison, you've just recovered from severe trauma. You're not strong enough for this kind of confrontation." "I'm strong enough to save my child," Catherine replied. "And I know Richard better than anyone. I know how he thinks, how he operates. We can use that against him." Maria felt torn. She wanted Catherine's help, but she also felt responsible for protecting her after everything she had already suffered. "Mrs. Catherine, if something happens to you, David will never forgive me. And if something happens to David because I was too afraid to help, I'll never forgive myself. We do this together, Maria, like we should have done 3 months ago." As they prepared to leave Haven Hills, Catherine made a request that surprised everyone. "Linda, I need you to call 911 in exactly 2 hours. Tell them there's been a shooting at the Harbor Freeway overpass. Even if you don't hear from us, make that call. You're expecting this to turn violent? I'm expecting Richard to try to kill everyone who knows his secrets. But he's not as smart as he thinks he is. And he's definitely not as tough as a woman who survived a war and a mother fighting for her child." As Maria and Catherine drove toward what might be their final confrontation with Richard Harrison, neither woman was afraid. They had both survived worse things than a cowardly man who beat women and threatened children. But Richard Harrison had also been making preparations. He had no intention of letting his wife and son live to testify against him. Tonight, he would finish what he started 3 months ago. The only question was which side would prove more dangerous. The Harbor Freeway overpass at Slauson Avenue was a desolate stretch of concrete and shadows. Industrial warehouses lined both sides of the street, most of them abandoned or used for storage. It was the perfect place for someone to disappear forever. Maria parked her car under the overpass as instructed. Catherine crouched in the back seat, hidden under a blanket. They had spent the drive developing a plan that was dangerous, but simple. Maria would walk into the trap to distract Richard and his men, while Catherine circled around to find David. "Remember, Mrs. Catherine," Maria whispered. "Richard thinks you're dead or too damaged to be a threat. Use that surprise to your advantage." "I remember everything now, Maria. Not just about the abuse, but about the strength I found to fight back. He made one mistake when he tried to kill me. He left me alive." Maria checked her phone one last time, then turned it off as instructed. In 90 minutes, Linda Martinez would call the police whether she heard from them or not. They just had to stay alive until then. Maria stepped out of the car and walked slowly toward the meeting point. The sound of traffic from the freeway above created a constant roar that would mask any sounds of struggle or gunshots. Street lights cast long shadows between the concrete pillars supporting the overpass. A figure emerged from behind one of the pillars. It was Richard Harrison, but he looked different than Maria remembered. His expensive clothes were wrinkled, his hair was disheveled, and his eyes had the wild look of a man who was losing control. "Miss Santos," Richard said, his voice echoing under the overpass. "I'm disappointed in you. I trusted you to take care of my family, not destroy it." "Your family was already destroyed by your violence," Maria replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Violence?" Richard laughed bitterly. "I provided for Catherine and David. I gave them everything. A beautiful home, expensive education, luxury cars. All I asked for in return was respect and obedience. You asked for fear. You demanded submission through threats and beatings." Catherine was unstable. She was paranoid, imagining threats that didn't exist. She needed firm guidance. Maria felt anger rising in her chest. She had seen the bruises, heard the late-night arguments, watched Catherine flinch whenever her husband entered a room. But she needed to keep Richard talking while Catherine searched for David. "Where is David?" Maria asked. "Safe for now, but his continued safety depends on your cooperation. You're going to sign a statement saying Catherine was mentally ill and suicidal. You're going to testify that she threatened to kill herself and David if I try to stop her from leaving. No one will believe that. They'll believe what I tell them to believe. I have money, connections, influence. You're an illegal immigrant with a criminal record." Maria was not illegal, and she had no criminal record, but she understood Richard's strategy. He planned to discredit her testimony by attacking her credibility and immigration status. "Even if I sign your statement, you will kill David and me anyway," Maria said. "You cannot leave witnesses." Richard's mask of control slipped slightly. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Yes, there will be an unfortunate accident tonight. A poor immigrant woman and a troubled teenager, probably involved in drugs or gang activity. Very sad, but these things happen in Los Angeles." While Maria kept Richard talking, Catherine had made her way around the perimeter of the meeting area. Her memories of the layout were starting to return. She remembered Richard bringing her to places like this during their marriage, when he wanted to have private conversations about her behavior. She spotted two men guarding a white van parked behind one of the warehouses. Through the van's rear window, she could see David tied up, but apparently unharmed. The men were focused on watching Maria's conversation with Richard, not expecting any threat from behind. Catherine had learned something important during her months of recovery at Haven Hills. The trauma of nearly being killed had not made her weaker. It had burned away her fear and left behind something harder and more focused. She was no longer the frightened woman who had tried to escape with her son 3 months ago. She was a mother whose child was in danger, and that made her more dangerous than any of Richard's hired thugs. Moving carefully between the shadows, Catherine approached the van from the blind side. The first guard never saw her coming. She hit him in the back of the head with a tire iron she had found discarded near the warehouse, and he dropped unconsciously to the ground. The second guard turned at the sound, reaching for his gun. But Catherine was already moving, fueled by months of pent-up rage and the desperate strength of maternal protection. She tackled him before he could draw his weapon, and they struggled on the ground beside the van. "David!" Catherine called as loudly as she dared. "David, I'm here." David's muffled voice came from inside the van. "Mom? Mom, is that really you?" The sound of her son's voice gave Catherine the strength she needed to overpower the second guard. She grabbed his gun and keys, then unlocked the van's rear doors. David looked exactly as she remembered, but older and more serious. His hands were tied, and his mouth was taped, but his eyes were bright with relief and love when he saw his mother. "I knew you were alive," David whispered as Catherine cut his restraints. "I knew you wouldn't leave me." "Never," Catherine said, embracing her son fiercely. "I will never leave you again." Meanwhile, Maria was running out of conversation to distract Richard. He was becoming increasingly agitated and paranoid, constantly checking his phone for updates from his men. "Your people are not answering," Maria observed. "They're probably just dealing with some homeless people who wandered too close," Richard said, but his confidence was wavering. "Sign a statement. Miss Santos. This ends badly for everyone if you don't cooperate." "It already ended badly for everyone the first time you hit your wife," Maria replied. Richard's control finally snapped. He pulled out a gun and pointed it at Maria's chest. "I'm tired of your moral lectures from someone who cleans toilets for a living," he snarled. "You should have minded your own business." "A child's safety is everyone's business," Maria said. "That child is MY's son. Catherine was MY wife. You had no right to interfere in my family. Your family was not your property to abuse." Richard raised the gun to shoot, but he was interrupted by a voice that made him freeze in terror. "Hello, Richard." Catherine stepped into the light, holding the guard's gun trained on her husband. David was beside her, free and unharmed. The sight of his supposedly dead wife and sons standing together destroyed the last of Richard's composure. Catherine? But how did you? You left me for dead behind that restaurant, Catherine said calmly. But you were always sloppy when you try to clean up your mistakes. You're supposed to be brain damaged. Amnesia. The private investigator confirmed you were a vegetable in some medical facility. Your investigator found what we wanted him to find. Did you really think I would go into hiding without making contingency plans? I've been preparing for this moment for 3 months, getting stronger, remembering everything, and planning how to destroy you. Richard's gun wavered between Maria and Catherine. You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine. Actually, I can prove everything, Catherine said. She pulled out a small recording device. I've been recording this conversation, along with the evidence I gathered before you tried to kill me, and the testimony of the medical staff who treated my injuries. You're going to prison for attempted murder, domestic violence, and kidnapping. The police will never arrest someone like me based on accusations from people like you. They will when the FBI gets involved, Catherine said. You see, Richard, while I was recovering my memory, I also remembered some interesting details about your business dealings. The offshore accounts, the money laundering, the tax evasion. I documented all of that too. David watched his parents face each other in this final confrontation. His mother looked stronger and more confident than he had ever seen her. His father looked like a cornered animal, desperate and dangerous. Mom, David said quietly, we should go. The police will be here soon. Yes, they will, Catherine agreed. Linda Martinez is calling them right about now. But your father is not going to run away this time. He's going to face consequences for what he's done. Richard's eyes darted between the 3 people who had destroyed his carefully constructed plans. A maid, a woman he had tried to kill, and a teenage boy. They had outmaneuvered him, outsmarted him, and turned his own arrogance against him. In desperation, he made one final play. Instead of shooting Catherine or Maria, he turned the gun on himself. If I'm going to prison anyway, I might as well deny you the satisfaction, Richard said. But David moved faster than anyone expected. The 17-year-old boy who had spent months searching for his mother, who had endured kidnapping and threats, who had never stopped believing in the power of family and love, tackled his father before he could pull the trigger. The gun went off, but the bullet hit the concrete overhead. Father and son struggled on the ground while Catherine and Maria rushed to help. By the time the police sirens became audible in the distance, Richard Harrison was unconscious and disarmed. Catherine held her son close while Maria stood guard over the man who had terrorized their family for so long. It's over, Catherine said, stroking David's hair. It's finally over. But as they waited for the police to arrive, Maria realized something important had happened during this confrontation. It was not just about saving David or stopping Richard. It was about proving that ordinary people, a maid, an abuse victim, a teenager, could defeat someone who thought money and power made him untouchable. They had shown that courage, love, and determination were stronger than violence and intimidation. They had proven that families created by choice and loyalty were more powerful than families destroyed by fear and control. Most importantly, they had demonstrated that no one, no matter how wealthy or influential, had the right to hurt innocent people without facing consequences. As the police cars pulled up under the overpass, Maria Santos smiled for the first time in months. Justice was not just for rich people anymore. At least not tonight. Man with money and connections, or 2 determined women with nothing left to lose. 6 months later, Maria Santos stood in the kitchen of a modest apartment in Pasadena, preparing breakfast for her new family. The morning sun streamed through clean windows, casting warm light on simple but comfortable furniture. The apartment was nothing like the Beverly Hills mansion where she had worked for 12 years, but it felt more like home than any place she had ever lived. Good morning, Maria, Catherine said, entering the kitchen with a smile. She looked healthier than she had in years, her face relaxed and peaceful. The constant tension and fear that had marked her final months with Richard were gone. replaced by a quiet confidence that came from surviving the worst and building something better. "Good morning, Mrs. Catherine," Maria replied, then caught herself. Catherine, you keep telling me to use your first name, but it feels strange after so many years. We're not employer and employee anymore." Catherine laughed, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "We're family, and family members use first names." David emerged from his bedroom, dressed for his senior year of high school. At 18, he had grown taller and more mature, but his eyes still held the same warmth and determination that had driven him to search for his mother. "Morning, Mom." "Morning, Maria," he said, grabbing an apple from the counter. "I have early basketball practice today, but I'll be home for dinner. Do you need a ride?" Catherine asked. "I'm good. Jake's picking me up." David paused at the door and turned back to his mother. "And Maria, are you nervous about today?" Today was the day Richard Harrison would finally be sentenced. After months of legal proceedings, plea negotiations, and testimony, the case was coming to an end. Richard had eventually pleaded guilty to attempted murder, domestic violence, kidnapping, and multiple financial crimes in exchange for a reduced sentence. "Not nervous," Catherine said, ready for closure. The trial had been difficult for all of them. Catherine had to relive years of abuse in public testimony. David had to describe his kidnapping and his years of watching his mother suffer. Maria had to explain why she had risked her own safety to help people who were not her blood relatives. But the trial had also been empowering. For the first time, Catherine's story had been heard and believed by people with the power to deliver justice. The evidence Maria and David had gathered was overwhelming, and Richard's expensive lawyers could not explain away the documentation of his crimes. More importantly, the case had attracted attention from domestic violence advocates and immigrant rights organizations. Maria's story, an undocumented woman who stood up to a wealthy abuser to protect a family she considered her own, had become a symbol of courage that transcended racial and class boundaries. The victim's advocate said Richard's lawyers are pushing for 12 years, Catherine continued. "With good behavior, he could be out in 8. "That's not enough," David said angrily. "He tried to kill you. He kidnapped me. He destroyed our family." "He didn't destroy our family," Maria said gently. "He destroyed his family. We built a new one that he cannot touch." This was true. In the months since Richard's arrest, Catherine, David, and Maria had created something neither of the women had ever experienced before, a chosen family based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. Catherine had used the evidence of Richard's financial crimes to recover most of the money he had stolen from her trust fund. Instead of returning to the world of Beverly Hills mansions and country clubs, she had bought the modest apartment in Pasadena and started a nonprofit organization to help domestic violence victims escape abusive relationships. Maria had initially planned to find another job as a housekeeper, but Catherine had offered her something different, a partnership in the nonprofit. Maria's experiences as an immigrant woman, combined with her natural ability to connect with people in crisis, made her invaluable in helping other victims navigate the legal system and find safety. David was thriving in his new school and had been accepted to UCLA with a full scholarship. He planned to study social work and eventually join his mother and Maria in their mission to help other families escape abuse. "I should get going," David said, hugging both women goodbye. "See you tonight." After David left, Catherine and Maria finished their breakfast in comfortable silence. They had developed an easy routine over the past months, sharing household responsibilities and supporting each other through the ongoing trauma recovery process. "Maria," Catherine said eventually, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." "Of course. Do you ever regret getting involved? If you had just minded your own business, you could have avoided all of this danger and drama. You could have found another job with a normal family." Maria considered the question seriously. It was true that helping Catherine and David had turned her life upside down. She had lost her job, faced death threats, and been forced to testify in a high-profile criminal case. For several months, Her immigration status had been uncertain, while lawyers worked to ensure she would not face deportation for her role in the investigation. When I was a teenager in El Salvador, Maria said finally, I watched soldiers take my neighbor's daughter in the middle of the night. The whole neighborhood heard her screaming, but everyone was too afraid to help. The next morning, they found her body in a ditch outside town. Catherine listened silently, recognizing that Maria was sharing something deeply personal. For years, I felt guilty about not trying to help her, Maria continued. I told myself I was just a child, that there was nothing I could do. But the truth was I was afraid for my own life. You were a child. There really was nothing you could have done. Maybe. But when I saw what was happening to you and David, I knew I had a choice. I could be afraid and do nothing like I did as a teenager. Or I could be brave and try to help, even if it was dangerous. You chose to be brave. I chose to be the person I wished I had been when I was 15 years old. And that choice gave me more than it cost me. Catherine reached across the table and squeezed Maria's hand. Thank you for everything. At 10 o'clock, they drove to the courthouse in downtown Los Angeles. The building was familiar to them now after months of hearings, depositions, and meetings with prosecutors. Sarah Chun, the lawyer who had become both legal counsel and friend, met them at the security checkpoint. Ready for this to be over? Sarah asked. More than ready, Catherine replied. The courtroom was packed with supporters, advocates, and media representatives. The case had become a symbol of broader issues around domestic violence, immigrant rights, and economic justice. Maria was surprised to see some of her friends from the domestic worker community in attendance, along with several families they had helped through their nonprofit organization. Richard Harrison entered the courtroom in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit. He looked older and smaller than Maria remembered, diminished by months in jail and the collapse of his carefully constructed facade of respectability. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who had presided over the entire case, called the court to order. She reviewed the charges, the plea agreement, and the impact statements from the victims. Mr. Harrison, the judge said, you have pleaded guilty to serious crimes that caused immeasurable harm to your wife and son. You used your wealth and position to intimidate and silence your victims. You tried to murder your wife when she attempted to escape your abuse. You kidnapped your own son to prevent him from finding his mother. Richard stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. These crimes strike at the heart of what should be the safest relationship in our society, the bond between family members. When someone violates that trust through violence and intimidation, they damage not just their immediate victims, but the fabric of our community. The judge paused, letting her words sink in. However, this case has also demonstrated something important about the resilience of the human spirit and the power of people to stand up for what is right. Ms. Santos, will you please stand? Maria was surprised to be called upon. She stood nervously, still not comfortable being the center of attention in formal settings. Ms. Santos, your actions in this case exemplify the best of human nature. You risked your own safety to protect people you considered family, even though they were not your legal relatives. You showed courage in the face of intimidation and determination in the pursuit of justice. Your example has inspired others in your community to speak up against abuse and injustice. Maria felt tears in her eyes, but said nothing, unsure what response was expected. Mrs. Harrison, your survival and recovery from attempted murder, and your decision to pursue justice despite the personal cost has given hope to other victims of domestic violence. Your strength has helped other women find the courage to escape abusive relationships. Catherine nodded respectfully, but remained seated. David Harrison, your refusal to give up hope when everyone told you your mother was dead, and your determination to find the truth demonstrates the power of love and family loyalty. Your actions helped save 2 lives and bring a dangerous criminal to justice. David shifted uncomfortably in his seat, still not used to being praised for doing what he considered the obvious and necessary thing. Mr. Harrison, the judge continued, turning back to the defendant, you underestimated the people you tried to intimidate and control. You believed that wealth and social position made you untouchable. You were wrong. The judge sentenced Richard to 15 years in prison without possibility of parole for 8 years. It was longer than his lawyers had hoped for, but shorter than the maximum penalty the law allowed. As Richard was led away in handcuffs, he looked once at his former wife and son. Catherine met his gaze steadily, no longer the frightened woman who had tried to escape months ago. David looked at his father with a mixture of sadness and relief, sad that their family had been destroyed by Richard's choices, but relieved that the threat he had represented was finally ended. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered around Catherine, David, and Maria. They had become the human faces of a story that had captured public attention. Catherine had learned to handle media interviews with grace, using them as opportunities to raise awareness about domestic violence and the resources available to help victims. Mrs. Harrison, one reporter asked, what do you want other abuse victims to learn from your experience? That survival is possible, Catherine answered. That there are people who will help you if you ask. And that the people who love you will never stop looking for you, even when the situation seems hopeless. Ms. Santos, another reporter asked, what advice would you give to other immigrant women who witness abuse in the families where they work? Maria had practiced this answer, knowing the question would come. I would tell them that staying silent does not keep you safe. Speaking up is scary, but abuse always gets worse if no one stops it. And I would tell them that there are people who will help, lawyers, advocates, organizations that understand immigrant rights and domestic violence. David, a third reporter asked, what are your plans now that this case is finally over? David looked at his mother and Maria before answering. I'm starting college in the fall, studying social work. I want to help other families who are going through what we went through. And I want to work with my mom and Maria to expand their nonprofit organization. As the reporters dispersed, the three of them walked to their car in comfortable silence. The legal process was finally over, but their work was just beginning. You know what I realized today? Catherine said as Maria started the car. What? Richard thought he was destroying us when he tried to tear our family apart. But he actually freed us to become who we were meant to be. Maria smiled as she pulled into traffic. He also proved something important. What's that? That ordinary people who care about each other are stronger than powerful people who only care about themselves. David laughed from the back seat. He definitely did not expect to be beaten by a maid, an abuse victim, and a teenager. We are not just those things, Maria corrected gently. We are a family, and families protect each other, no matter what. As they drove home through the busy streets of Los Angeles, Maria reflected on how much had changed since that morning 6 months ago when she had found David crying in the kitchen. She had made a simple decision to help a family in crisis, and that decision had transformed all of their lives. More importantly, their story had inspired others. The nonprofit organization Catherine and Maria had started was helping dozens of families escape abusive situations. David's story had encouraged other young people to trust their instincts when they suspected abuse in their homes. Maria's example had shown other immigrant workers that they had rights and voices that deserved to be heard. The fight against domestic violence and the struggle for immigrant rights would continue long after Richard Harrison finished serving his prison sentence. But today, at least, justice had been served, and 3 people who had once felt powerless had proven that courage and love could triumph over fear and control. That evening, as they shared dinner in their modest kitchen, Maria Santos looked around the table at her chosen family and felt something she had never experienced before: complete contentment. She had found her place in the world, and it was exactly where she belonged. "Your mother is alive," she had shouted to David that day, when she found Catherine behind the metaphorical dumpster where Richard had tried to discard her. But in saving Catherine Harrison, Maria had also saved herself. She had discovered that home was not a place or a job, but the people who stood by you when everything else fell apart. And that was a lesson worth fighting for, starting with a nosy maid who refused to mind her own business.